my name is Catherine Breuer. As Evelyn introduced me earlier, I am the coordinator of Student, Family, and School Services. That means I support a team called Parent Community Coordinators, or PCCs, as you'll hear them referred to in our system. And this is a group of family engagement experts that make sure that our families feel that they have a connection. We are the bridge between our families and our students in our system. I'm also a former educator. I still consider myself an educator of 16 years. I worked in both DC and, of course, MCPS as a social studies teacher, nationally board certified in social studies for secondary. So I've taught in middle school and in high school, was a staff development teacher, and then an administrator. And so I am so pleased to join you this evening. And I also speak from my experience, not just from my professional experience, but from my own experience as a parent. I am a parent of two little, maybe they would not consider themselves little, but two children, one who's 10 and one who is 8 in the 5th and the 3rd grade. So I also speak from the parent lens, as well as a parent of 2 students in the system also. I see a message in the comment. Is it okay if I take screenshots of the slides? Absolutely. Just please be safe, because I know that you're commuting. So again, welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Next slide, please, Sandy. Thank you so much. So our agenda for this evening, we're going to talk briefly about the why of conferences, but first we're going to get to see who is on this call with us, so I can make sure I'm tailoring this presentation to meet your needs. Then we'll talk about the when of conferences, and then followed by the what and the how. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of what are some tips and strategies that you should be aware of before the conferences, during the actual conference, and then afterward. Next slide, please. So if you don't mind, please write in the chat your student's school or the cluster, if you'd prefer, just so we can see the geographic area of those on the call with us today, so that we can better understand who's in the audience today. So what school does your child attend, or what geographic cluster? And this will help knowing if I have, predominantly elementary school with us, for example, or high school, middle school, etc. So we have some elementary, some a couple middle, elementary, middle. Oh, we do have a high school. Awesome. So a lot of elementary and a lot of middle, but we also have high school. So I want to make sure I do not forget about our high school friends. Okay, awesome. And it's just looking through the chat here, it also seems like we span the geography of MCPS, the county, as well. We're all over the county. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. That helps me make sure I'm meeting your needs. Next slide, Sandy. So one other point of engagement for you all today, before we really dive into it, is to just take a moment to reflect. And this is assuming that you have had a parent-teacher conference previously. If you, of course, have a child in kindergarten, this is going to be new for you, or perhaps new for you. But how has your parent-teacher conference experience been previously? What would have made it better? And finally, what do you hope to gain from tonight's workshop? And you can put some thoughts in the chat. We are actually a small enough group. If anyone wants to come off mute and just share their thoughts verbally, but would love to hear from you either in the chat or on the mic about your previous experience. Okay, awesome. I see. I'd like to know what questions are important to ask or topics to cover. We are definitely going to address that. I would like to have met all the teachers with the parent-teacher conference and keeping this going throughout the year. Oh, that's a good one. I'll also mention a little bit about that also. Oh, I avoided conferences because I didn't want to sound like an idiot. I appreciate that honesty and that transparency, because we're going to talk a little bit about that it is such a nerve-wracking experience for families. I know on that side of things, as I mentioned, as a parent, and I'll clue you in on a little secret also. It is extremely nerve-wracking for the teacher also. The teacher is just as nervous as you all are. And so you are not going to sound like an idiot by any means, because you are the ones that know your student the best in that room. So you are going to be a wealth of information for the teacher, just like you are going to be hoping to receive information from the teacher. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, good. It sounds like some of us have had positive experience about grades, showing classwork, establishing good relationships, starting with the parent-teacher conference and keeping that going throughout the year. Yes, 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 that is what we hope. We hope that this is just a springboard, that this is not the only time that you get to engage with your students' teachers. Validating that my kid was on track. Yes, yes, yes. And it was difficult to talk to all of the teachers. Yes, and we hear that a lot, especially, sometimes in the upper elementary, it's that case as well. And certainly in middle and in high school, when your child has many teachers all in the same day and in different periods, it becomes all the more complex for sure. So you really have to kind of prioritize based on what you know about where your student's at in each of those classes. And then a question, I was told that this is the only conference we will have this year. How do we keep track of child's progress in this case? All right, I love these questions and I feel really confident that we're going to get to all of these. And if there is something that I do not address in this presentation, at the end, I will make sure I leave time for a question and answer session so that you don't leave here with any additional questions. All right, any questions before we dive in? Awesome. All right, Sandy, next slide, please. So the importance of parent-teacher relationship, I can't stress this enough. We didn't certainly include all of the research out there on this slide, but in the last 20 to 25 years, there has been a tremendous amount of research that shows when the parent and the teacher have a strong, positive relationship, that the student is much more likely to be academically successful. So of course, improved academic performance, we're in the game of teaching and learning. And so that relationship is only strengthened when both parties put in the work, right? And so we'll talk about how the conferences act as a springboard for that work. And of course, it's stronger relationships between families or between parents and their students, between the parents and the teacher, between the teacher and the student. It really forges strong relationships between all of those folks involved when they know that there's some accountability and that there's care on all ends. And of course, there's better communication. There's regular, consistent communication as opposed to kind of a one and done situation where you talk to your teacher once in November and then you never speak to them throughout the rest of the year, right? We don't want that. We want to make sure that we're forging this strong relationship that is sustained over time. And then fourth, if there are any concerns about your student, whether they be academic concerns or social emotional, and we'll talk about the social emotional concerns towards the end of the presentation because those are equally as important and sometimes go missed. That we identify those concerns early so that we can put the right interventions in place and monitor to make sure that your student is making the progress that they need to be successful, again, both academically and social emotionally. Next slide, please. So when can you conference? And this goes directly to a question that was in the chat. Our system has dedicated time to conference November 25th and 26th. And that is Monday and Tuesday of next week. However, I will say that a lot of schools are moving away from just conferencing on those 2 days, because if you can imagine, especially at the middle and the high school levels, a teacher has anywhere from 100 to 160 kids that they teach. And so for conferencing for all of those students or for any students that have concerns or for any families that just want to connect with the teacher, it's very difficult to do in those 2 half days. So we always advise to just check with your school on when they are planning to conference and make sure that you're aware of the things that are very school specific. And then this third point is so important that parents, our caregivers, you all are always welcome to schedule a conference at any time. It does not need to be in November. It does not need to be next Monday and Tuesday. It can be any time that you want to connect about a question, about a progress that your child is making. Please do not feel like this is your only opportunity. Next slide, please. Tanisha asked, do we need to put that request in writing? Certainly I would shoot an email or through the Remind app, or however you prefer to communicate with your child's teacher. I would definitely make sure that you ask them when is best. Maybe shoot them some times that work for you to set aside, a 20 to 25-minute window where there's some dedicated time for you to ask the necessary questions and for you all to work together. All right, so some things to note that are important before the conference. So let's dive into kind of the logistics now that we know when they're going to happen. Next slide, please. This is a great opportunity for you to kind of do some information gathering. At this point in the school year, you have likely kind of heard whispers and maybe some side chatter about how school is going for your student. But if your children are like mine, I pull what I can pull from them when I can pull it. So they aren't always the most forthcoming with all of this information. So it's important to maybe dedicate some time in the car at dinner, at breakfast, whenever you have a captive audience, and ask them a little bit about what's going well for them, what they're finding difficult in school, anything that you think is important for you to know, and anything that they want you to know prior to engaging with their teacher or their teachers. Log into Parent View. If you don't have Parent View access, or it hasn't been activated, or you just don't know how to use it, that is something that our team is well equipped to help you with. So you can certainly contact me and I will get you in touch with your parent community coordinator. But Parent View is the tool that we use system-wide for you to see your students' grades in real time. And especially this is critical for the middle and the high school levels. Grades should be updated regularly. And we have a system-wide policy for making sure grades are updated regularly. At the elementary level, there aren't grades posted, every week or every 2 weeks, but there is valuable information that you can find in Parent View. For example, again, I told you about my fifth grader who I just had his parent conference with his teacher this past Monday. It was only 2 days ago. It feels like 3 weeks ago. And I logged into Parent View. I looked at some of his standardized test scores. There was MAP, his reading, and his math scores that I could view from fall of 2024, and I could compare it to the spring of 2024, so I could see what progress he has made, or where there are gaps. So certainly Parent View, no matter your level, can provide some great insight into kind of the progress made so far this school year. Certainly, if you're in elementary school, this is more relevant than in middle or high school, but my children come home with a take-home folder every day, so I can actually see the physical work samples that my child is doing in school, and that helps me also get an idea for the work and some questions that I need to ask about some areas that I notice because of that work, where there might be some gaps in learning. Certainly notify the school also if you have any interpretation needs. It is not your responsibility to find an interpreter. This is something that is the responsibility of the school, of your child's teacher, but it is something you need to arrange with the school in advance so that there are no language barriers, because this work is too important. And then finally, take note of anything else that you want to learn more about or have questions about that come up through the conversations, through the student work, through the test scores that you're looking at, something maybe you've noticed about the behavior of your child when they come home from school. All of that is worth bringing up, certainly, to your child's teacher. Next slide, please, Sandy. All right, so when you get to the conference, what you might want to tell the teacher, you might want to tell about your child's special interests and abilities, what makes them light up, what makes them motivated. Because as I said in the beginning, but I think it's worth noting again, you know your child the best. Certainly, our staff, our teachers work for hours with your student, and certainly at the secondary level, at the middle and high school level, they see your child less during the day and see more teachers for less time. And they know a lot and they have unique insight, certainly, but you as the caregiver know tremendously more. So feel free to talk to them about what you know makes your student tick. What your child says about school when they come home from school. How are they feeling about school? Is there a subject that is particularly troubling? And maybe the teacher will have some greater insight. Maybe they have noticed the same thing. Maybe they haven't noticed it at all. And you can have that conversation about what that might mean. And certainly any special health or family concerns, you would want to share with the teacher, anything that might impact their ability to focus, anything that might impact their ability to learn is worth bringing up, certainly, to the teacher. Next slide, please. So questions you might want to ask the teacher, and I know this was directly in the chat, and I know this is small print here, but ask to see samples of your child's work. What work are they actually producing? What does their writing look like in 5th grade? What are the books being used? Sometimes when I went to my son's parent-teacher conference, I was surprised at the level of books that he was reading. And it made me consider, when we go to the library together or when he's reading a book at home, I realized I need to up my game. He's reading at a higher level than I had initially thought. So these are the reasons why it's so important to ask these questions. And to actually see, if you're at the school, you can actually get your hands on a book and look at what it is that they're spending their time reading in school. Oh, is my child performing on grade level in reading, writing, and math? Your teacher will be able to show you the standardized test scores that correspond to them being on grade level or below grade level or above grade level. And again, they can show you actual samples of their work and walk you through what that means. What does it mean to be below grade level in math, for example? And what are the ways that you can work together to improve? Have you observed any special interest or talents that my child may have? There's things that, kids act differently, certainly at home, than they do at school. And so the teacher will have unique insight from their perspective on the things that they have seen that motivate your child that maybe you had never considered at home. So it's important to ask that question as well. And what are the ground rules for completing homework or turning in assignments or being prepared for class? What are the expectations that I need to know as a parent that I can reinforce at home? What's this is especially true or important rather for middle and high school, but what's the retake assessment policy? If my student performs poorly on an assessment, which assessments can be retaken? Which assessments cannot be retaken? Are students given a study guide to prepare? How do students prepare for these assessments? These are the questions that are important for you to know so that you can support your student at home prior to taking those assessments. And inevitably, when they do perform poorly, because we all perform poorly on something at some point, and get feedback on that, how can I support them in bringing up that grade? And more importantly, learning the content. And then, of course, how can I help at home? How do I take this information and do something about it? What's the most effective ways that the teacher has for you to help your student? Next slide, please. During the conference, so this is the part where I always remind families that you all are nervous to engage your teachers, your students' teachers, in a conversation about your child. It is anxiety producing a little bit. You don't know what they're going to say. You don't know how they might respond. And the teachers feel the exact same way. They're nervous, they're anxious, they aren't necessarily always given the tools and the training on how to interact with families. So it is important to just remember that everybody is on the same team in that conference. We all want the best for your student, and we're all working towards having your student be academically and social emotionally successful in school. So make sure that you both understand and agree upon any actions if something comes up in terms of getting a reading intervention, for example. What are the interventions that are going to take place for getting your student up to be on grade level for reading, for example? And how are you going to follow up to see what that progress looks like? And talk about with the teacher. This is what I've noticed is working as we put this intervention in place. Here's what I've noticed is not working. What are you seeing as the teacher? And again, really having a team approach to making sure that your students getting what they need. And then to clarify next steps with each other, again, to make sure that everybody's clear. Everybody leaves the conference knowing now what is the next step. And maybe for some, there is no next step. Maybe your student is doing just fine. They're getting enrichment. They are being successful, and there's not any next steps. But if there are some areas of concern or there are some challenges, it's important to make sure you know what those next steps are. Ask how to contact the teacher if you have additional questions. Some teachers communicate, they prefer email. Some people prefer text via Remind, the Remind app. Just make sure that you know how the teacher prefers for you to communicate, and let the teacher know how you prefer to communicate as well. And that the school knows that they have the best contact information for you too. And it's important to know, again, if you run out of time or you need more time to talk, ask for another meeting. It is not, it does not need to be a 15-minute window is all you get for the whole semester or for the whole year, right? You have an interest, the teacher has an interest in the success of your student. And if you need more time, don't hesitate to ask the teacher for another meeting. Next slide, please. And then after the conference. So after the conference, next slide. There's a couple of things to keep in mind when you're talking to your student. Talk to them about the discussion. Don't shy away. Don't, you know, you don't have to withhold the fact that you are meeting with the teacher. It's important that your student knows that you're all, again, on the same team and you're working together in their best interest. And you want to make sure that you keep it positive. You keep it encouraging. If there are areas of concern, that you discuss that calmly, and you ask your student what they're experiencing too. So if there is homework completion, for example, if homework completion is an issue and the teacher brings it up, maybe that's something you had no idea was an issue. You have a conversation with your student. Hey, Ms. So-and-so, let me know that homework completion is an area of concern. And I see that you haven't turned in the last 3 homework assignments when I looked in parent view. What can I do to help make sure that you get this homework turned in? What are the barriers that is preventing you from getting the homework done, right? And having a conversation as opposed to it being, you know, accusatory. Why did you not do your homework? You're not doing your homework. Why are you being lazy? Those kinds of things. And follow through on supporting your child's learning at home. Again, because you've asked in the parent-teacher conference how you can best support your student. The teacher's given you some concrete ways. And so you want to follow through on those. You want to follow through on those suggestions. And again, if something's not working, you tweak it and let the teacher know. So that they're aware too of some things that are really working for you at home. and keep the teacher informed. If anything comes up or you learn new information that would help the teacher best reach your students during the school day, don't hesitate. Shoot them an email or shoot them a text via remind, and that will only help them. Next slide. And remember, this is just so, I can't say this enough. You and the teacher are on the same team. You are not on opposing teams. You are on the same team. Every single person in that room, in that conference, has your child's best interest at heart. And you all have such unique perspectives to share with one another. And it's not a situation where you are just going to be receiving information from the teacher. You have so much to give of your own information about your student to the teacher that will only help the teacher be better. Just like the teacher has unique information to share with you about your student. So don't hesitate to take advantage of the insights that your teacher is going to share about your student, and celebrate those things, the great things that your teacher mentions about your student that are their strengths, and make sure you point that out to your student as well. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about parent-teacher conferences in terms of like their academic performance. We said, go to parent view, look at their grades ahead of time, look at any standardized test scores that may be available in parent view, look at their grades for secondary, and all of that is so important. And equally important is a student's social and emotional well-being. So we always encourage parents too to think about the other ways or the other reasons that students may be having difficulty learning. And as a teacher, as a former teacher, I always cared about my students' academic success. And I also cared that they were developing into students that could work together, that were collaborative, that were problem solvers, that were critical thinkers, that were people that cared for their community. And so the social emotional aspect is just so critical also on top of the academic component. So just be aware if your student is struggling after receiving academic interventions. If your student shows sudden changes in mood or behavior or feels a certain kind of way every day after they come home from school and you're not sure what it is, or maybe you have an inkling of what it could be, this is something that there are experts in your student's school, like your school counselor, certainly your teacher would have insight, school psychologist, this whole team of folks that can support the social emotional aspects of your student as well. And so you certainly can talk to your student about what they're going through and provide that unique insight to the teacher or to the counselor, and talk with your students about just what they're experiencing, how they're feeling about their academic environment too, because those insights tell us so much about what are some challenges that may be preventing your student from being as academically successful as we know that they could be.